Hi everyone, and thanks for tuning into my channel. This is going to be the first video in a new series where I'm going to share some of the presentations that I deliver at events around the world. This first one, Ready Learner 1, Experiential Learning in Virtual Reality, is something that I delivered several times in 2018. So let's dive in. I'm a huge science fiction fan. I have been since I was a kid. And one of the things that I always find fascinating about sci-fi is the fact that the technology that we see in science fiction films and we find in science fiction books very quickly becomes a reality, especially in the modern world. These four examples that you can see here from Star Trek, we've got one from the Avengers Iron Man, Minority Report and Back to the Future. All four of these things have reality in some form or another in recent years. And yes, that is actually a hoverboard with Tony Stark, with Tony Hawk, the famous skateboarder, riding it in the bottom right hand corner there. If you haven't seen that video, it's definitely worth hunting down on YouTube. One of my favorite pieces of sci-fi is Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. This is a book that I read when it first came out, and being someone that grew up in the 1980s, absolutely fell in love with it. The nostalgia, the whole premise of the quest to find these hidden keys. I just adored it and was eagerly awaiting the potential of a movie. Never expected it to actually come to fruition because of all of the rights issues that would have ensued with producing it as a film, and was delighted to hear that Steven Spielberg picked it up and followed the development of the film closely until in March of this year. I should say last year, because it's 2019 now. If you haven't seen the film, definitely go and give it a watch. It's a really fun time. Lots and lots to see, and definitely something that's worth watching more than once. Now, Spielberg himself, when speaking about the film, he kind of interesting. This was in one of the trailers. There was a really interesting trailer that was released for the film, where rather than just showing footage from the movie, it included an overdubbed narration from Spielberg talking about the project. And as part of that, he was quoted as saying, "I suddenly saw a future which Ernest Cline, the writer of the book, envisioned. It wasn't that far away from what I think is going to happen someday." And it's quite interesting, especially when you relate it to education. So in the film, education really isn't depicted very much. There are glimpses of classrooms near the start of the movie when the quest begins. Now, this is different. The film is actually different in several areas to the original book, but the depiction of education is very limited in the film. The book, there is a whole section about the education system, which takes place, I believe, in chapter 7. Please do correct me in the comments if I'm wrong there. I'm pretty sure it's chapter 7. And what's explained is that the schooling system inside virtual reality that takes place in this world of Ready Player One, it all exists on a planet called Ludus, which is the Latin word for school. And Ludus is populated with carbon copied schools, and the students attend these virtual schools, and within them they take part in various virtual reality learning experiences. Now, as someone who's been exploring the role of virtual reality in education for a number of years now, in actual fact, the headset you can see just about in the top left-hand corner picture is my very first VR headset, and that was from 2014. It was interesting to me to read the depiction of education in Ready Player One, and in fact, in preparation for the film coming out, I actually reread the book, and something hit me. The description of the education experiences within Ready Player One, this vision of the future, which Spielberg himself says he thinks is very close to something that will one day come true. Every single experience within that book was something that I had actually already delivered myself in classrooms across Jess. So what we're going to do, we're going to break down some of the text from Ready Player One, the original book, and I'm going to give you examples of how these experiences, these virtual reality learning experiences, can be accomplished today in modern day classrooms. So here's the first chunk. During our world history lesson that morning, Mr. Ivanovich loaded up a standalone simulation so that our class could witness the discovery of King Tut's tomb by archaeologists in Egypt in AD 1922. Now, anyone who knows me will know that ancient Egypt is my all-time #1 favorite topic to teach. I absolutely love the topic of ancient Egypt. And I still support some of our Year 3 students across the 2 primary schools at Jess in the learning of the topic of ancient Egypt. And I've actually done with students. I've done it a couple of different ways, in fact. On mobile VR headsets, I've used an app called King Tut VR2, which is one of the apps produced by Eon Reality. This is a free app and actually allows you to step into the shoes of Howard Carter, the famous archaeologist who discovered King Tut's hidden tomb. You even get a small degree of interaction, which is somewhat uncommon with mobile VR apps. And you're able to use the pickaxe tool to dig through, and then you move down through into the tomb, and you can discover a recreation of the tomb and some of the artifacts as they were originally found. Now, when it comes to the 6-DoF experiences, the one that I've used this year is an app called Discover Egypt. This is a great free experience that is available through Steam, and this again is a full 3D depiction of King Tut's tomb, but this time you've got that freedom to move around inside it.
These neck rests were not only used with pillows to support the heads of royalty, but they were also thought to act as dream conduits that allowed communication with the gods during sleep.
So the next chunk of the book. In my next class, biology, we travelled through a human heart and watched it pumping from the inside, just like in that old movie Fantastic Voyage. Now, this was actually the piece of the book where I had my eureka moment, because I'd actually delivered that exact experience the day before I read this part of the book. This was with some BTEC sports science students in our secondary school. An app called, well, at the time it was called You by ShareCare, but it's actually been rebranded since. It's now called ShareCare VR. This is another free experience which you can download from Steam, and will work on the Vive or the Rift or Windows Mixed Reality headsets. This is an absolutely brilliant experience because it allows you to manipulate a human body, but it also allows you to then drill down into specific organs and actually step inside them. And just as in the book, you'll see in this clip here, we're actually going to be able to walk inside the human heart. Now compare this kind of experiential learning to traditional, say, textbook-based learning. We actually stood there seeing the ventricle, seeing the atrium, getting a clear understanding of how this organ works. And when we carried out this lesson with the students, we had a member of the teaching staff with them narrating the experience to them. There are other opportunities to delve inside the human body as well, using apps available from Steam. The Body VR is quite a popular one, which allows you to travel through the bloodstream. This really is an app that's like the Fantastic Voyage. Another great example is Microcosmic Worlds, which allows you to shrink down to microscopic size to learn about things like pollen and viruses, and eventually you shrink down to the size of molecules. Back to the book then, and the third chunk. In art class, we toured the Louvre while all of our avatars were silly berets. In my astronomy class, we visited each of Jupiter's moons. Now, we've kind of got two different parts here, so let's just split this down. So in terms of visiting the Louvre, experiences at Jess where students from our art department have visited virtual art galleries. Some of you may have seen the video I posted here on the channel of myself using the Vive Focus to tour the Kramer Collection gallery whilst out in the desert. If you haven't seen that, I'll put the link down in the description below. The images that you can see here come from the VR Museum of Fine Art, which is a brilliant experience for students because it collates different masterpieces from all over the world into one virtual gallery. So you can stand looking at the statue of David, and then you can peek over his shoulder and the Mona Lisa's hung on the wall behind, or you can jump in the lift, go upstairs and look around a whole gallery of Monet's water lilies. In terms of Jupiter, I must admit I've not taken students to Jupiter. It's just not somewhere where we've ventured per se, but I have taken several students to Mars using a wide variety of experiences. Mars has become one destination that is definitely becoming more and more popular for VR experiences, and there's a whole host of them available, whether you're talking about Mars Walk VR and mobile headsets, or the Access Mars web VR experience from Google and the JPL. The photo that you can see here on the right actually comes from inside Engage, which is the platform from Immersive VR Education, the makers of Apollo 11, and within the Engage platform there is a Mars space. There's actually a Mars experience where you follow the Curiosity rover and listen to original NASA recordings, and the photo here is of the student who is taking this selfie that you can see on the right using the built-in tablet system. One thing that you will notice about all of these examples I'm giving you, there is one distinct difference between the way that they are described in the book and the way that I am portraying them, and that is the fact that in each of my examples the students are in isolation, the students are on their own, whereas in the book it's regularly referencing the fact that they're there as a group, just as they are together inside a virtual space throughout the entire story, inside what's called the Oasis, in this one connected virtual world. Now, this is something that is a lot harder to bring into classrooms right now because of the barriers of price and the logistics of bringing in a huge amount of sixed off headsets and the necessary equipment, whether you're talking about the base stations, the trackers, the laptops. But it is something that isn't as far away as perhaps some people realize, because there are multiple platforms already out there that allow for group experiences, whether you're talking about AltSpace or Somnium Space or VR Chat or Sansa. In fact, I can give you one more picture. Now, the part of the book referred to being on Jupiter and seeing the moon go by in the sky. So let's take a look at this chunk. As our teacher spoke to us, Jupiter loomed behind her, filling half the sky, its great red spot turning slowly just over her left shoulder. Well, I don't have an image that shows you that, but what I do have is a huge group of educators from around the world stood together on Mars with a beluga whale in the sky. This is again from Inside Engage. This is from my CPD and VR events, which are the free professional development events that I've been hosting for about 1.5 years now, Inside Engage. There's a whole channel dedicated to the CPD and VR events here on my YouTube channel, excuse me, I should say a whole playlist. So do check out that playlist if you've not seen any of the footage from these. They're quite remarkable. Especially I recommend checking out the videos from the first anniversary event. We had speakers like Bob Fine, Charlie Fink and HTC Vive President Alvin Van Gralen in as guest keynote speakers. These images actually come from an event I hosted on the eve of the film's release, which included a panel discussion. I delivered a variation on this exact presentation, and then we all ended up on Mars watching the trailer with the excitement levels for the film's release building up. I think it's clear to see that this depiction of this multi-user space that we see in Ready Player One, and potentially the multi-user educational space that we read about in the book, is not as far away as perhaps many people think. Okay, I'm going to wrap up there, folks. Thanks for listening, and I hope you found it interesting. Please do add your comments below. If you haven't yet checked out my website, virtualiteach.com, the link will be down below in the description. Please do hit the subscribe button for more great content coming related to AR and VR in education and training.